On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
This episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by 5280 Life Sciences Consulting. If you need help setting your strategy, meeting your operational goals, or are selecting and implementing critical technology in your business, we should talk. Visit 5280lifescience.com to schedule a meeting and find out more.
Today on the Life Science Success Podcast, we are speaking with Tom Heck. He's the SVP of Commercial Solutions at TrialCard. Welcome, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
So first of all, can you tell listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, gladly. So started my career in the life science arena in the pharmaceutical world back in 1993. And so it's been an illustrious 28 years. And from everything from sales management, marketing, licensing, acquisitions of drugs into our companies, and then senior management for the last half of that time period, mostly in startup biotech pharmaceutical companies. It's been an exciting ride. A variety of different experiences at those companies.
Yeah. And so where are you based?
So I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. It's where after the sales management period, when I went into marketing and the licensing and building of companies, this is where I landed here in the RTP area, just outside of Raleigh.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, it's great.
So can you tell us a little bit more about TrialCard and what is it that they do?
Yeah, sure. So TrialCard is a pharmaceutical, or I'll call it now biopharm services company. We actually serve the commercial pharmaceutical marketers, sales teams, market access, managed care teams with a variety of services. The services range from what we started in 20 years ago, copay cards, which I think now we've processed maybe around $18 billion worth of refunds to patients to discount their drugs, mostly in prescription medications. And then we moved over into medical benefit, which is obviously a drug combined with a procedure. We reimburse either patients or healthcare providers rapidly for those services. It's not unusual for a managed care company to be a 90, 120-day waiting period for healthcare providers to be paid. That now takes 6 to 15 days. So that's extremely rapid. We're also involved in hub services, which is a lot of explanation of benefit type of work, where we help patients navigate that nasty gauntlet, if you will, of prior authorizations and am I going to get approved for this drug? We do that for the pharmaceutical manufacturer, but it benefits the patient in the end. We also several years ago, about 7 years ago, moved into to healthcare provider engagement. So now we have a service called Engage HCP, and that allows us to educate, create awareness for drugs that are coming to market, educate about disease state. We help rare disease companies find patients and healthcare providers that need their medication. That's like a needle in a haystack type of search. We provide a lot of different services in that realm. We can talk about more, but so quite a few services, and then we have patient engagement applications, which are also on the website as well as on the phone apps, that allows patients to get reminders of when to go see the doctor, when to take their medications, new services or offerings for those drugs as well. So it's a pretty broad array of services, mostly for commercial pharma. We also have something for clinical supply R&D folks as well that eliminates all the pick, pack, ship, and ownership of drug during the process of a clinical trial.
So to that point, I mean, have you guys been really engaged broadly then with regards to COVID?
COVID's really been, yes, very much so. COVID's been a real traumatic event for everyone, of course. The pharmaceutical industry, in a lot of ways, has benefited from it, right? Being able to do new research in infectious disease, to be able to do new clinical trials. But what COVID did in our industry is it stopped or slowed down, hit the pause button on 6,000 clinical trials of meaningful drugs. Those probably took about 18 months to really get back on track. In the midst of that, the other thing that happened was you saw an elimination of drug representatives and educators being medical science liaisons, clinical nurse educators. All interaction with patients and healthcare providers virtually came to a stop. We went from about a 43% no-see healthcare provider situation. Most of those are in IDNs or ACOs, the hospital systems that want to limit the amount of branded drug reps coming in. We saw it go from 43% no-sees to upwards of 65 to 70%, and then it escalated right up to 90 to 100% of the time. These people were unapproachable. You couldn't drop off samples, couldn't get copay cards or discounts to patients. So yeah, a lot of interruption happened during that time period. And now we see healthcare providers telling us that they're 75 to 85% likely not to want the drug rep to come back in the office. They're looking for that to be either a virtual connection, send me samples in, or, connect with me in a hybrid fashion where there might be some virtual and some face-to-face interaction, but that's fairly limited. So I think we're going to a model of about 65% no-see doctors now.
Wow. Well, I mean, I know as a patient, I'd love to stay out of a doctor's office as much as possible, but on the other side, I mean, I could completely understand if you need to go and you need access to medications, it's something that might be required on the physician side, but, I guess, from their standpoint, are they seeing, is the reason why is because they just don't want additional people coming into the office?
It's funny. I've kind of coined this little phrase that the healthcare provider in this situation looks at the sales rep, the educators, the medical science liaisons as walking petri dishes. You're one more potential person to bring a virus from office to office or from person to person. And that certainly has exacerbated the situation where it was primarily because they didn't want branded drug promotion and sales. But that really causes me a concern, Don, because the situation is the drug rep really, for the most part, educates on a new therapy coming to market that nobody's heard about before. There's the safety, the efficacy, the how to utilize the product in a proper fashion, how to dose it. That's really not being conveyed like it used to be. So now we've gotten to a situation where you hope that the physician stops or the healthcare provider stops long enough to actually study the medication. And I think that really causes some issues with regard to new therapies coming to market and how they're going to interact with healthcare providers, and patients are going to find novel therapies that may be, significantly better than what was on the market before. Yeah.
Well, and it could obviously adversely affect, a lot of people. I mean, especially if they're not, if part of what you guys do is help people get reimbursed or help people get the drugs that they need. It's really unfortunate, certainly from that standpoint as well.
That's right. Yeah, we started tackling that challenge through our service, Engage HCP. So if you don't mind, I'll just launch into that a little bit. Engage HCPs. Great. Yeah, we basically use your web services like we're doing today to have a meaningful conversation around education and awareness of here's this new drug, here's what it does, here's the studies that were behind it, here's what the FDA approved. This is how you would dose the medication for a patient. By the way, here's the copay cards or the reimbursements that are available, and here's how we can help the patients. So what we've done is we've set that up in a virtual manner where we basically take award-winning sales representatives that have been excellent at their job in educating and growing awareness of a particular medication, and we put them through a rigor of tests to make sure that they can work within our systems and our, we'll call it technology harness, to be able to utilize new software, new technology that allows us to have an interaction that's crisp, clear, and able to convey a message. And oftentimes that's done through lunch-in services. It might be through an educational therapeutic board service, so the P&T committee that would be at a hospital. We launched actually one of the first COVID, I'll just call it a COVID medication or treatment. We launched that into the space, and we did that virtually with a host of representatives that are excellent at what they did. So we're finding ways to do that. Now, when it comes down to a nurse being able to educate a patient with regard to how to give an injection to themselves or to use a particular therapy, that becomes pretty tricky as well. We're having to do that now in a virtual manner as well.
And in terms of working with the different pharma companies, overall, in terms of, developing these materials, does your company do that, or do you primarily ask for the company to provide the materials?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually usually take what the company and their excellent marketers have already put together, what their medical and regulatory affairs people have done. They cobble it together. They give it to us. We train with them in their environment by their standards and their rules, and we follow what they've given us to work with. Then we use our savvy from years of experience as salespeople, sales managers, to manage just as if we're part of their team. So we don't come in to replace anything that the pharmaceutical company does. We actually exist to assist all of their efforts and to find a way in. And we've tried hiring just standard drug reps, somebody like me that would have been a top performer in my prior companies. And if I wouldn't be able to work within technology, I'm pretty much useless at that point. So we look for this combination and put them to work, and basically to help the pharmaceutical company and their brand again, gain that traction that they need.
Yeah, I know labeling is really critical with regards to any regulated, medical device and drug. So,
Mhm.
obviously it's, a critical thing. And so, utilizing the pharma industry, or, whoever your partner is, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we basically, their regulatory and training materials are all set, and we basically are found to be compliant, by following their standards. But we record the calls of our representatives. If it's whether it's an educator or whether it's a sales representative, we record all those calls. We monitor those calls. We QC those calls. Those are made available to their staff, including their compliance officer, to make sure that we're staying on script and we're doing what they've asked us to do. Yeah, really important part of what we do.
Yeah. So in terms of, staff augmentation and things like that,
Mhm.
have you seen any increases in staff augmentation now in the new environment, I guess, post or during COVID?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think I could think of that in a couple different ways. So we clearly augment what they do. When we hire those people as our staff, not their staff. If the effort doesn't take off and doesn't do what they do, whether that's a pre-launch awareness campaign, whether we're educating at the time of launch, whether it's to boost market share and awareness of the medication and the drug in the light of a variety of reasons, or whether we're educating, we hire the staff. We keep them onboarded as our staff, but they look, sound, feel like, and basically introduce themselves as our clients' staff. The beauty in that is if something doesn't go as planned, the product doesn't meet the standards, efficacy or safety don't meet, what the FDA studies, showed, then we can trim that sales force. We have the flexibility of growing it, shrinking it, or eliminating it very quickly without any trauma to our client. So that's one way I think that we do that. And the other thing that we do is we augment their staff because we hire a very, very specific model of, again, award-winning excellence, both in their job duty, which is the pharmaceutical education and awareness, but also in technology. So they have to be able to work within a phone system, a computer system, our Salesforce type system, and or the clients. So a lot of times we'll actually just utilize the client service if that's what they want us to do, to make sure that we're putting everything right into their CRM system.
Nice. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
nice. And then from the patient side, how does TrialCard help patients receive prior authorization?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Well, we do it a couple ways. So when the client signs up, oftentimes they'll put a hub service in place, and that hub service allows for us to put a what we call our PEC. It's a patient experience center intact, and that then is staffed up with the appropriate number of we'll call operators. I think for the common person's knowledge, that will handle those calls, triage the calls as they come in from patient and or healthcare providers that provide us private and HIPAA compliant information to be able to work with that patient's insurance and their plan, which, there's thousands of plans, 6,000 plans inside of employer plans or large PBM systems. And we navigate that conundrum for them. And, where you really run into issues is when you get to the beginning of the year, January through about April, there's something called the donut hole. And it's where patients have, their deductibles reset. They've got to meet a certain dollar limit again before they can start to receive the benefit. So a lot of our pharmaceutical clients have means of I'll call it direct to patient contracting through these copay cards and reimbursement systems that allow for us to navigate that for them to keep patients on therapy and on the medications that are making their life better.
Really good.
Yeah.
So over the last year, what are some of the biggest opportunities that you've seen in your market?
The biggest one, it goes back to the healthcare provider engagement. It's probably been where we've had the greatest and most explosive growth, very significant for our company. I think we have about 80% of our clients are repeat clients. They keep coming back, cycle after cycle for us to continue to educate and promote on their medication. We've had, for instance, a rare disease company that asked us to help find four patients all year this year. And it's because they're that difficult when there's only 1,000 patients or 5,000 or even 10,000 patients for rare and ultra rare diseases. One, you've got to find a healthcare provider that is diagnosing them and get them on medication as well. So there's a variety of areas there that have grown. And if we take a look at the landscape and look at clinicaltrials.gov and you look at where the trials are being run, I want to say 60% of clinical trials, and you would know this being a life science consultant,
right?
60+% of the marketplace is really driving at these orphan and rare disease drug development scenarios. So when that's where the development's occurring, we're trying to meet them at that place. And a lot of that is pre-launch work. If somebody's got copper deficiency, how do you find somebody with copper deficiency? So we have unique ways of finding through labs and other detection that a doctor is running a lot of tests for this particular disease state. And that would give us a signal that that's probably a healthcare provider our client wants to know. And they most likely want to make sure that they know us, the healthcare provider wants to know us because we're going to help their patient get on the therapy that they've been looking for. So that's been explosive. In the clinical trial arena, usually a clinical trial will acquire a bunch of drug, send it to all the different sites. They hold all this expensive medication, and at the end of the study, what wasn't used gets thrown away. So they have ownership of drug, and that gets tossed. When you have 6,000 studies that end, that would have been a lot of thrown away medication. But one of the things that we do is we actually make that virtual. So when there's medications that can be found at a pharmacy or a specialty pharmacy delivers at home, then we can eliminate all the pick, pack, ship, distribution, holding this product, and at the end, the destruction of it. So we eliminate a ton of pharmaceutical waste, and that has been probably our second fastest growing division for several years now. So quite a bit there. And then, of course, medicines that require procedures require a medical benefit rather than a copay, like a drug benefit at the pharmacy. And so having our rapid reimbursement model that streamlines all that activity for reimbursement to healthcare provider or patient has grown precipitously as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to sort of watch the different waves in terms of investing, right? So right now, I can tell you from what I'm seeing in terms of like the investment waves, we're not seeing a lot of rare disease investment. So a lot of these things, either past, kind of where they're needing some of that early money to do some of the studies that they need to do, or they've already requested the funding, one of the two. But it is really interesting to sort of watch the different waves that are happening overall, because I know that there's a lot that's going on right now with regards to like spinal diseases and things like that, versus a lot of the cancer research that used to be done in the past. So definitely a shift.
Yeah, I have a question for you, actually, if you don't mind me flipping the table.
Sure.
So I get to interview you now, right? No, one of the questions I would have is, do you think that's really a large portion of that is because of COVID and all these studies they're trying to do on known therapies that might have evidence in COVID, or new therapies, new vaccines? Do you think that that's hogging up that space, or is it that there's a real transition to areas that really haven't been researched? I'd love to learn from you there.
So the transition started kind of in November of last year. Okay. So it leads me to believe that it has something to do possibly with COVID. I don't know. I mean, I don't, to be fair, right? I
Yeah.
don't honestly know, but I can say looking at the tea leaves, you know, you know, the Silicon Valley Bank has published a paper about this. You know, there are different sort of investors that are also watching these trends that are just saying, hey, we're seeing a shift, you know, in the market right now with regards to venture capital, as well as, you know, even, you know, angel and seed funding that is going on right now. So, you know, I actually did a brief talk about this exact topic to a law firm a couple months ago.
Right. It
So,
makes complete sense. You know, there was so much investment for 5 to 10 years in the orphan rare space. And then you see the switch over to COVID. They're looking for the new shiny ball to invest in. So I do think that that's very interesting. And I would think from our medical benefits standpoint and our ability to educate, we educate on drugs, diagnostics, and medical devices all alike. Healthcare providers, a healthcare provider, if they don't want you in their office, you know, for mostly distancing reasons right now, then that provides a challenge. And those are the types of areas we're really growing into quickly.
right. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So in terms of, you know, biggest challenges that you had last year, what were those?
Biggest challenges. You know, it's funny. I mean, it's really not going to be probably around one of our services, probably about morale, right? Trying to take care of our people asset, which is our number one asset. It's our most valuable asset. I think it is in any company. People are everything. That's what makes everything run. The computers, the machines, and everything stay plugged in because of people and running. So I think probably a bit of morale. I think trying to understand and be able to see into the next 12 to 18 months, 24 months, where is this going to go? And how do you predict that? How do you forecast it? How do you appropriate, you know, your roadmap of technology and investment and innovation when you don't know what the next 12 to 18, 24 months are going to look like, right? And we're still not out of the woods.
Right.
So I think probably investing in the right places was really vital. And again, when we saw virtual engagement of healthcare providers get a lot of attention, and we started getting more inbound calls, and we started seeing those services blow up, we knew that that was a place to invest. So we did. We staffed up more highly. I think we tripled the size of our group. You know, sales and growth came along with that, and so have the inbound inquiries have continued. Hasn't slowed down, and we've launched for now two of the largest biotech, and we've launched again for a 4 patient biotech company that's looking for a rare disease medication. So everywhere in between, it seems like it's important.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, keeping morale up in this environment is an interesting thing. I've seen everything from sort of you know, lunch and learns, you know, where they're trying to people are trying to re-engage employees, you know, after hours events, you know, where you try and, you know, have some cocktails and things with people virtually, which is a bit
Right.
of a challenge. Yeah, I mean, it is a really interesting time, right? I mean, especially, you know, now, but luckily given this time, you know, we have things like virtual breakout rooms and things like that where we can, you know, get small groups together. Cause that's always my biggest thing is like, once you get, you know, 4 or 5 people together, somebody more or less is hogging the microphone.
Right.
So, and, I try and stay quiet, frankly, but you know, just kind of my natural nature is that.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, I mean, there are times whenever if you were live, you just interact more. You'd have the opportunity to kind of, you know, have this really open dialogue and talk really open. So kind
Yeah,
of
I
a
think, I
challenge
think
in
that's
this
really
environment.
important. I mean, think about the distractions, the etiquette. You know, you see people dressed down in their attire. You see a variety of, you know, you hear cars going by in the background, birds chirping, and you know, it's certainly created a completely different environment. And I think probably just training to the etiquette of that. I can't say that I've seen necessarily companies do a lot of training on web presence and etiquette. I think that's one of the challenges by nature. I think because we do a lot of virtual engagement and have for years, I think it probably gives us a little bit of a feel for what that's like. And we've done a lot of WebExes over the years. But yeah, it's a really good point. It's something to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I also could say that I'm thankful that this didn't happen in the 80s. We would have definitely, been in trouble a lot quicker without all the virtual tools that we have at least now.
I agree.
Yeah. So I have just 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
What inspires me? I guess I'll take that personally, and then I'll give you a professional answer. How about that? I'll give you 2 answers to 1 question.
Perfect.
Personally, I just love people. It's what motivated me to go in sales management, to interface, at advocacy level. I worked I did some lobbying for 3 years for a healthcare initiative up in Capitol Hill. That was exciting. Being part of 6 startup companies, you interact with everybody because you're small and unique. So I think, probably from that perspective, people really, drive me. And then, as a teen, I was asthmatic as a child and as a teen. And so the first company I got into was a respiratory company. And I really got to learn a lot about the disease state that I had no idea about prior to the industry. And so I think really education, is important. And I think one of the things that grieves me the most is probably my biggest concern for the industry. When I have healthcare providers, and I have a daughter that works actually at Duke as a medical assistant, when I know that healthcare providers do not get visits from educators in their offices anymore, I often wonder, how in the world do they learn about new therapies? And if I'm their patient, how am I ever going to know that there's something better than what I've been taking for 20 years? I'm frustrated by that. I'm confused by it. I understand where there's a cost containment issue the industry has, and they want to try to prevent branded drugs. But, for heaven's sakes, I mean, if we didn't come up with new therapies that we do today, you wouldn't have a COVID vaccine. You wouldn't have a lot of other medications that are helping people with infectious disease, cancer, and whatnot. But how are doctors learning about these things? Right. So virtual engagement is absolutely vital. I still see the value of the sales representative and the face-to-face interactions and the ability to share information. And I think the hospitals and the IDNs and the academic centers have done as when they bought a lot of practices up, I think they've done a really big disservice to the healthcare provider and limited their education.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, right? I mean, both from the sales side, but just in general from the broader knowledge standpoint, just having that access to information and understanding what is out there.
Yeah.
As we said a few minutes ago, right? So if the investment waves change and new MS drugs come out or new Parkinson's drugs come out because of some of these things that are currently in the pipeline, how do people find out about the latest and greatest in the pipeline unless they have people like your people, explaining it to them? So,
right. And, if you're a specialist, you're probably going to have a higher sensitivity to an MS drug, like you just mentioned. But if you're the primary care physician, how long will it take you? 2, 3, 5 years to even learn about the medicine and to know enough about it that you feel confident in prescribing it? Yeah, it's a big challenge.
Yeah, and I've said this numerous times on this podcast. My parents are in a small town in Indiana, and they deal with this problem all the time because their GP is their primary face to medicine. So for sure, something that would inspire you and get you out of bed every day.
Yeah.
What concerns you?
What Probably just that one. I'm sorry. Probably just kind of obviously natural segue. That would be my biggest concern. Is how do the drug companies get their information to doctors about new therapies? That's probably my number one concern. I think you'll see a lot more central nervous system medications being put in place because of the suicide levels, the depression, the anxiety, and the worry that people now have, the hypochondriac nature. I think we'll see a lot more in the CNS area. I'll put my prediction out there. You heard it here first. But I do believe that there's going to need to be education around that, right? What works, what doesn't work, and how do I find out about these therapies? But my biggest concern is truly the lack of education of healthcare providers. And then it comes down to really, who do you trust anymore, right? Who do you trust? Where do you find, facts that you can put a stake in the ground on?
Yeah, that's for sure. And then what excites you?
I think what excites me is the resiliency of this industry, right? The people that are in the industry join the industry, for a reason. And it's not about, just a healthcare career because it's a great place to be. I think a lot of people really do it because it's a feel good, do good type of industry. And I'm most excited about seeing how we innovate our way out of where we're at today and the new technologies that are put in place, the new ways that we engage, the new ways that we help patients and advocacy groups to be able to do what they do best, which is help patients and improve healthcare. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the ability to connect like this with, consultant types that, get to see a diversity of medications. We do too. We I think serve currently 400 different brands or 200 different manufacturers, 400 brands. And when you get to see that spectrum of what different people do, you're able to take that knowledge and that expertise into other clients and into other parts of the industry. So I'm excited for what it's going to bring, despite the challenges that it's provided.
Yeah. And I mean, it is an interesting yet exciting thing to watch. People say, oh, I've seen spike protein before. I can translate that from where we currently are in medicine to something else faster.
Right.
That to me is just got to be one of the most exciting things.
Sure.
And then just to see the level of tools that are coming for people. I mean, we talk about artificial intelligence quite often on the podcast as well. Mm-hmm. And, I just thinking about the overall enablement of people, through that, not necessarily just in life science, but the way computer science is also helping people as well. So
absolutely. I mean, we get a call probably every week about some different variety of AI that we could utilize to enhance our services. And we take them all seriously. We evaluate each one of them. I did that this week alone, looking at data that helps us identify these healthcare providers for rare disease and in other places. So you have to look at them. And I think that is an exciting space to be in.
Absolutely. Well, Tom Heck, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for being a guest on Life Science Success.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.